Hello everyone, and welcome to our third weekly segment. This is October the 16th of 2022. As usual, let's start with news from Ukraine. First off, China has warned all of its citizens to leave Ukraine now, which is a good sign that we're probably going to be seeing a continuation of missile and suicide drone attacks for a fair while. And of course, we are already seeing some of that. Specifically, we've seen suicide drone attacks on Mykolaiv, Odessa, and Kiev, and a cruise missile strike on Zaporozhye. There's also reports of 3 missiles shot down over Dnipro. We are also seeing a major Ukrainian offensive in the south. The spokesman for the Russian Ministry of Defense, Igor Konashenkov, claimed in his daily briefing this morning that the attack has been driven off by artillery, but he also claims to have destroyed more planes than Ukraine had at the start of the war, so that's to be taken with an extreme dose of skepticism. We have also been seeing more Russian soldiers arriving in Belarus to be part of this new joint force that we've been hearing about. As this is happening, Lukashenko has continued to accuse Ukraine of planning terrorist attacks against Belarus. To move towards world news, we've also seen Russian airstrikes in Idlib and Azaz in northern Syria. We're also seeing a fire at the Evin prison in Iran, which seems to be a continuation of the ongoing protests. So far, 4 prisoners have been reported dead as a result of the fire. Also happening right now is the 20th National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party. It seems almost certain that Xi Jinping will retain control of the Communist Party and of the military. Meanwhile, whether or not he remains president will be decided at the People's Congress in March of 2023. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang is expected to step down. He was a more liberal influence on China compared to Xi, especially in the economic sphere. So barring any major surprises, the key thing to watch here is who replaces him as premier. Now we're going to go through a quick Q&A before we move on to analysis. The first question is about the protests in Iran, and specifically why they haven't been sticking around as prominently in Western media. And I think other than it being far away in the Middle East, the main reason is that nothing has really significantly changed there over the recent protests. It's mostly just the same thing continuing, and this usually won't make for good headlines that will get a lot of attention. Now, if something significant happens with the riots around this prison in Tehran, this may change. We could see either a massacre by the security forces. It's also possible, though less likely, that the riots could have a significant effect on the prison, maybe some people getting out, something along those lines, and that would probably get a lot of media attention. The second question is about how terrestrial strife is going to affect the International Space Station. Now, Russia has already announced their plans to withdraw from the program in 2024, but the ISS is expected to be decommissioned by 2031 anyway. This was already the plan prior to the war, and as far as I know, nothing significant has changed since. Now I want to take a quick look at how the mobilization has gone so far for Russia. And unsurprisingly, the answer is it has not gone well. We're already seeing some Russian dead coming back from Ukraine who were drafted in the recent mobilization, and that's a very, very bad sign. Specifically, it means that at least some of the forces that are being sent to Ukraine from the mobilization are going with no training, and it's not like the Russian army was doing well in that regard prior to this. There have also been 2 mass shootings of recruits and volunteers. The latest numbers are 11 dead in one and 22 dead in the other. The Russian state has also had to allocate additional security to recruitment centers due to an increase in attacks against them, usually arson. Now I think it's important to remember, and I think a lot of people forget this, but Russia is not the Soviet Union. It does not have an unlimited reserve of manpower, and it does not have a politically mobilized active population. The best guess is that only around 20 to 30% of the population actively supports the war, with another 20 to 30% opposed, and the rest generally apathetic and apolitical. Now, the more the mobilization affects ordinary people's lives, the less they're going to be apathetic about it, and the more they're going to be against it. So as well as having about half the population of the Soviet Union when it collapsed, their ability to utilize those human resources is also a lot weaker. And right now, it looks like not only are they wasting these soldiers, throwing them into the meat grinder with no training, so they won't be very effective in combat, they're also taking a segment of society which was fairly neutral and apathetic towards the war and turning them actively against it. And beyond that, of course, it fractures the fundamental political bedrock of Putin's Russia, which is the state will stay out of the people's lives, and in exchange, the people will stay out of politics. Now the state is very much getting involved in people's lives, and we aren't likely to see a significant benefit to it. And to be clear, I'm not saying we're about to see Russia burn in the fires of revolution. I'm not saying that Putin's regime is about to collapse. I'm only saying that this is undermining the basic foundations of the Russian government, and at the same time it's unlikely to produce any serious military results. This has been our third weekly segment, and thank you for listening.